The Game Awards are coming. The Game Awards are coming. That was way cooler in my head. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we've got one of my favorite gaming traditions, voting in the Game Awards. And 2024 actually marks the 10th year of the Game Awards since they started all the way back in 2014. And through the years, the show has evolved into a gaming event that packs in way more than just awards. It's a safe bet to always expect new updates, announcements, and even some world premieres. And depending on who you're talking to, some years have had way too much of all of that compared to the actual awards, but to each their own. If you're looking for a night of gaming news that also happens to celebrate some of the biggest games of the year, then you don't want to miss the Game Awards, or you can hit that subscribe button here on my channel and I can fill you in on the highlights afterwards. Whatever works for you. This year, the Game Awards are rocking 29 total categories that span everything from indie games and AAA Goliaths to esports teams and content creators. And I'll have our whole little discussion here timestamped in the description if you just want to bounce around. Now, I'm switching things up and I'm not voting for who I think should win, but who I think will win, because that's kind of how the Game Awards already works. Winners are chosen with a 90-10 split, 90% coming from a jury of gaming industry pros like journalists and podcasters, and 10% from the audience, the players themselves. So basically, the audience vote isn't really going to sway a win one way or the other unless it effectively acts as a tiebreaker for the professional panel. And listen, love it or hate it, this isn't the Gamers' Choice Awards, and I don't make the rules, but they also have the Players' Voice section that gives gamers out there in the wild the chance to run the show and pick their favorite game of the year through 3 rounds of voting. So pop back in for that to see the chaos ensue. Also, I'm going to be skipping a couple of categories here, like the stuff in the esports section and a few others, just because I'm not in the loop enough to really have an opinion here. So for the ones that I skip, you can share your opinion down below. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start voting in the 2024 Game Awards, starting off with the Goliath itself, Game of the Year, recognizing a game that delivers the absolute best experience across all creative and technical fields. And this is a super controversial category this year because of one game in particular that stands out from the crowd. So you've got Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. Now, these are all huge games that came out in 2024, but is Shadow of the Erdtree something that should be eligible? Now, to talk about that, I want to go over to the FAQ section on the Game Awards website, where they have a specific section that says, are DLCs, expansion packs, and remakes and remasters eligible? And they say the Game Awards aims to recognize the best creative and technical work each year, irrespective of the format of that content's release. Expansion packs, new game seasons, DLCs, remakes, and remasters are all eligible in all categories. But the qualifier here is if the jury deems the new creative and technical work to be worthy of a nomination. So the game has to be good enough in and of itself, regardless of how it's packaged, to be nominated for consideration for one of these big awards. But Game of the Year, that's a very, very big deal. And I look at Shadow of the Erdtree and I come back to what Ains over at Seasoned Gaming said, where it is a game that you effectively have to boot up by playing another game. It is a DLC, it is downloadable content, therefore it is not really a game that released in 2024. So should it be eligible? I don't think so, especially whenever you have a game like Helldivers 2 that came out, kind of blew up, had some issues along the way, but still is a net new game that launched in 2024. Now, this has gotten a lot of people all hyped up over it. I've seen a ton of arguments online for one side or the other, but I want to remind everybody, we're talking about video games. This is a video game award show. It doesn't really matter all that much. But let me know down below, should Shadow of the Erdtree be among the nominees? Whether you think it should or shouldn't, it's here right now, it's on the table, so let's break it down. Out of all of these, I think it really comes down to, when you think about the gaming industry professionals that are going to be voting on that jury, Balatro or Shadow of the Erdtree, because Elden Ring and FromSoft have such a strong following globally in any community that you basically take a peek into. But Balatro came out of nowhere, absolutely dominated the world, came out on mobile, dominated again, and it's just something that's kind of kept up this beat of positivity where it's just a small single developer that made a very, very addicting card game that for a lot of people is a masterclass in game design. That's the term that I keep seeing thrown around. Now, I haven't played Balatro yet myself. It's on the list to get to during the holidays, but out of everything here, I'm going to go ahead and throw my vote in. The Balatro is going to be the one that wins Game of the Year. And I think a ton of people are going to be upset. I think it's going to be an absolute nightmare on social media if Shadow of the Erdtree or one of these other big games doesn't win. But I think based on what I've heard about the game's design and based on what I've heard about how good the game itself actually is, I think that when you look at that industry vote, Balatro is going to be the one that brings home the gold for the big game of the year. And when you look at best game direction, it is basically identical in terms of the nominees that we've got here. So this is awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. And again, you have Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Shadow of the Erdtree, Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. So going back to the definition of this one, awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. I think that when you look at that definition, game direction and design, I feel like you've got to come back to either Shadow of the Erdtree or Metaphor ReFantazio, because ReFantazio did a lot of things that I think Persona fans really enjoyed. I've heard that it's one of the best games of the year. Definitely not a game that I'm interested in, but I've heard really good things about it. Now, that's not to undermine what Rebirth has done either, so I could easily see that winning. I think that it's down to 3 of these right here. I don't know what's going on with the game direction in Balatro, but when I think about game direction, I again almost approach this category from like the perspective of a film critic, where you think about what this brings to the medium as a whole. And out of all of these, I think that it comes down to Shadow of the Erdtree, Rebirth, or ReFantazio. I think I'm going to go with Rebirth just because of the cinematic nature of that game. From what I've seen from cutscenes and what I've heard from other people, I think that Rebirth is going to be the one that wins the best game direction for 2024. Best narrative for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game. Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Metaphor ReFantazio, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, and Silent Hill 2 are our nominees. I think this is a very clear winner. And I think that is going to be Hellblade 2. And I pick Hellblade 2, and I think it's going to be Hellblade 2 because of the story that it tells, where it is a very human story. It involves the concept of psychosis and the way the world is built to deliver that message in a very unique and interactive way. I think this is a masterclass in terms of storytelling and overall game design. I think it's really, really well done. And that's not to undermine what these other games have done, but Silent Hill 2 is a story that's already been told. That's something that people are familiar with. When I look at the games on the left, those are all very gamey games, for lack of a more professional term. And so I think with all of that considered, Hellblade again brings that kind of artistic approach that I think does something the other games don't really do. And so for that reason, I think that Hellblade 2 is going to be the one that gets the best narrative of 2024. Now we have best art direction for outstanding creative and or technical achievement in artistic design and animation. And the nominees are Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, Metaphor ReFantazio, and Neva. Technical achievement in artistic design and animation, I think, comes down to Shadow of the Erdtree or Metaphor ReFantazio. I've heard good things about Neva. Shout out to Silkinit, somebody that's been in a couple of the different communities that I'm in online that I know loves Neva. But Shadow of the Erdtree and ReFantazio artistically do stuff that I don't even think the Black Myth does, where Black Myth kind of hits that level of what you would expect from, like, dare I call it a Souls-like game, but something in that kind of genre of that action, hack and slash kind of vibe. So I think that hits the mark, but I think that Shadow of the Erdtree, just thinking about the enemy design and the world design, and then Metaphor ReFantazio, just being what it is, where it is effectively just this giant creative outlet in so many different ways, I think that it comes down to either of these. At the same time, now that I'm thinking about Astrobot, the way that bakes in so much of PlayStation's history for its artistic design and the animations that it bakes in there, I could see an argument being made for the best art direction for Astrobot. But then again, you're putting it up against Shadow of the Erdtree and Metaphor. And so when I think about those three specifically, I think the Metaphor is going to be the one that brings home the gold for the best art direction because of how out there it is. And I know that Elden Ring is still a new game in the grand scheme of things, but I think that people kind of know what to expect from it now, and Shadow of the Erdtree builds on what Elden Ring had already laid the foundation for. Metaphor feels like something entirely new, at least from what I have seen, that builds loosely on Persona, but that does a lot more with it. So for those reasons, I think the Metaphor is going to be the one that brings home the best art direction for 2024. Best score and music for outstanding music inclusive of score, original song, and or licensed soundtrack. Bet Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be on that list whenever it is eventually released and nominated for various awards. But we have Astrobot, Rebirth, Metaphor ReFantazio, Silent Hill 2, and Stellar Blade. And I can't speak to any of these because I haven't played any of these, so I don't know what music is involved here. What I will say, if we're making predictions about who is going to win, not what I think should win, which again, I don't really have an opinion here, I've seen the tracks, or I should say I've heard the tracks on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and they do not miss when it comes to the music in a Final Fantasy game. And I've heard some really nice stuff from Rebirth. So I think that based on past years and what I've heard people talking about with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that's going to win Best Score and Music for 2024. Continuing the audio trend, though, we have Best Audio Design, recognizing the best in-game audio and sound design. And this is a really exciting category for me because I have strong opinions, which we'll share in a minute. But the nominees are Astrobot, Black Ops 6, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, and Silent Hill 2. Sound design is so important in all games, but 3 of these games in particular. In different ways, though, and that's what's interesting. Black Ops 6, it is a hardcore first-person shooter. I need good sound design to know where people are in the game. On top of that, if you want to go back to like the narrative and the music and stuff, I need good music to set the tone for what it's like in the late 80s and early 90s. So all of that goes into what the sound experience is like within Call of Duty Black Ops 6. But for audio design, I think that they do that very, very well. Treyarch really nailed it when it comes to the sound design for Black Ops 6. Just to be able to pinpoint locations of enemies on multiplayer maps and things like that, it is on another level, and it sounds really good when you use headphones for it. Hellblade 2. The sound is the story. The story is the sound. Having these voices surround you and in your ears, you can feel the psychosis kind of being shared through the audio experience these developers have designed for this game. It's something that's kind of unlike anything else that I've ever really seen in a game. And whenever sound design is that important, you know they have to treat it well. And so for audio design, Hellblade 2 takes it to another level because it has to. That's its storytelling mechanism. That's the delivery for the message they're trying to tell. And so they do it exceptionally well. Silent Hill 2 is a horror game, and horror and sound go hand in hand. You've got to really be able to hear the fear, if you will, where you can really feel this tension through the small little details in the sound and audio that make the game what it is. But out of all of these, I think that Hellblade 2 takes this because sound is a core central part of the game. Again, that's how they convey the feeling of psychosis for someone that has multiple different voices in their heads telling them what to do, influencing their decisions. And beyond just that, the actual world sounds, the ambient noises, the spaces that you're in, they sound exceptionally phenomenal. It is just a very, very well-designed game when it comes to audio. So for that reason, I think Hellblade 2 wins Best Audio Design for 2024. Now we've got Best Performance. And this is one I want to call out because I'm excited to not see names that I am super familiar with on here. Not that Troy Baker doesn't do great work and not that he won't be nominated for Death Stranding 2 and probably Indiana Jones, but me not being familiar with any of these people beyond Melina Juergens, I think is a step in the right direction because you get more people that are younger, the next generation of what these game characters are going to be doing in the next 10 to 20 years. So for the nominees for Best Performance, you've got Brianna White from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Hannah Tell from Life is Strange Double Exposure, Humberly Gonzalez from Star Wars Outlaws, Luke Roberts from Silent Hill 2, and Melina Juergens from Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, excuse me. Out of all of these, I think that there are some exceptional performances here, but Hellblade 2, once again, is on another level when it comes to facial animations, expressions, the invoking of emotion. I think that game is the definition of art in game form. I mean, it really does take things to another level, and to do that, you've got to have all of the mechanisms firing on all cylinders, including your talent. And Melina Juergens coming in as the main character in Hellblade, as Senua, is just exceptionally well at delivering those emotions in a medium that typically has been kind of difficult to properly convey emotions through. I mean, you think about the facial animations in a lot of games and they feel very hollow. Not to call out another one of these performances, and it's not based on the performance itself, but Star Wars Outlaws has this kind of hollow feel to it unless you're in key cutscenes. Whenever it's just characters talking to each other, there is depth to the world, but then there's that kind of like I guess breaking, if you will, of that experience whenever you look at a poorly animated facial animation. And between the team behind Hellblade 2 and the delivery of Melina Juergens, they have really taken that and escalated that to another level to make that a game that's kind of like breaking new ground for this generation, but also for the medium. And so for all of those reasons, I think Melina Juergens deserves and will get Best Performance for 2024. Now we've got innovation and accessibility, and this recognizes software and or hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology, and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audience. And the nominees are Black Ops 6, Diablo 4, Dragon Age the Veilguard, Prince of Persia the Lost Crown, and Star Wars Outlaws. And this is a category that I'm not going to vote in. I don't really have an opinion on because I don't use these tools myself when I play the games, so I can't really tell you who's done it really well and who hasn't, or who has done it exceptionally well while others are doing it very, very well. But what I will say is that it's so nice to see so many big games on this list, like Black Ops 6 and Diablo 4 and Dragon Age and Star Wars Outlaws and even smaller stuff like Prince of Persia. That's a very big deal because opening gaming up to more people is always going to be a good move. And to see the biggest AAA developers kind of setting the pace for moving things forward is really inspiring for what I think smaller developers are going to be able to do. Not that smaller developers aren't already making huge headway in doing that kind of thing, but seeing big names on the list will inevitably inspire other smaller devs to do the same and kind of set the tone for what the expectation is for accessibility in gaming. Now, there are plenty of voices out there that I think you should check out. I'll drop a couple of these right here just with their handles and whatnot, but Steven Spohn, I think it's the way you pronounce his name, and then Steve Saylor are two that are really big voices in the gaming community for accessibility and making sure the games can meet people where they are. So good on them for continuing to share those messages, and good on these developers for continuing to bake these tools into their games to bring gaming to more people, regardless of their level of ability. Next up, Games for Impact, for a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message. And the nominees are Closer the Distance, Indica, Neva, Life is Strange, Double Exposure, Sinuous Saga Hellblade 2, and Tales of Kenzera Zhao. I think this is going to be a tricky category for a lot of these nominees to kind of navigate, because one of these things is not like the other, and that's Hellblade 2. I mean, that was a main marketing beat for Xbox earlier in the year, that whether you're in the gaming industry professionally or not, it's probably a game you've heard of and are familiar with. Now, Indica, I've seen on Steam a couple of times pop up. Closer the Distance, honestly, I've never even heard of it. And then you've got games like Neva that I know just came out that are good and that I've heard good things about. But even comparing that to something like Life is Strange, I'm familiar with Life is Strange, never heard of Neva. Pun intended there. And then you have Tales of Kenzera Zhao. And for me, I think that this list of nominees really comes down to either Hellblade 2 or Tales of Kenzera Zhao, because both of those have very strong messages behind them. Tales of Kenzera Zhao, though, was a victim of not only being an imperfect game, but ultimately coming out at a rough time whenever you just had Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. And when you compare those two, both in terms of art style and gameplay, they kind of blend together in a lot of ways, even if one has a very, very deep message and the other doesn't really have that much depth to it comparatively. So for that reason, I think Tales of Kenzera Zhao deserves a huge shout out. I know their team has gone through it recently in terms of layoffs and figuring out what the future looks like after some underperformance for the game itself. But even with that said, I think Hellblade 2 is on another level when it comes to, again, sharing a human story, the experience of psychosis, working through these mental health issues, all of that combined together and portrayed in a video game format that not only looks beautiful, but plays well and has some depth to it in a very small amount of time, because it's only about 5 to 6 hours long. Now, all of that, I think, is a very, very impactful story that they deliver there. So for that reason, I think Ninja Theory brings home the gold for Games for Impact for 2024, and Hellblade 2 is going to be the one that wins that category. Best ongoing game. I always love this category because I'm a big fan of ongoing games. I mean, I still play Halo Infinite from time to time and jump in there, even though I've kind of fallen off over the past couple of months. Turns out 3 years is the end point for me after they've stopped putting out full seasons and whatnot. But I love a good game that keeps players coming back for more. So this is awarded to a game for outstanding development of ongoing content that evolves the player experience over time. And the nominees are Destiny 2, Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, and Helldivers 2. This is a category that I think is unique because there's one game on this list that I'm not super familiar with what exactly they're doing, but I kind of know from the outside looking in that they're doing big things, and that's Final Fantasy 14. Now, this game came out in 2013, so we are now on year 11 of this game being out in the wild. And so looking at what it's doing, I believe it's just coming or has come to mobile. So it's now kind of expanding into that world. I think I saw that in the news last week. So it's clearly getting enough support to warrant getting that additional expansion, and it's one of the biggest online games in the world right now. But then I look at things like Destiny 2 that had the final shape that a lot of people thought was the win that the game needed. Now, sales-wise, I don't think it hit the mark on what they were hoping it would do, but in terms of putting a bow or a pin in the Destiny 2 story and kind of really wrapping it all up, or I should even say the Destiny 1 story. I think it goes all the way back to when the game first launched in 2014. That is a very, very impressive feat to accomplish. Diablo 4, Vessel of Hatred, really good expansion, and they've continued to add new stuff season over season that's made the game more fun with more stuff to do. I don't think people talk about it as much, and I don't think it's done as much as some of these other games that are on this list, but it still does some very impressive things. Fortnite, it's Fortnite. It always has new stuff coming out. They're doing collabs. I mean, when you've got Eminem and Snoop Dogg in your trailer, you know you've got money to throw around and people are going to be paying attention. And then Helldivers 2. That's a game that's been through it this year. So if you don't know the story behind Helldivers 2, it came out, was a huge success. Then Sony got involved, implemented this PSN requirement feature on Steam. People got mad. Now some people in certain regions without PSN are locked out of the game, but a ton of other people have come back. So it kind of went from this giant worldwide, I would say borderline Pal World level of sensation, which, by the way, Pal World hasn't been nominated for anything, which I think is kind of wild. But Helldivers 2 was on this kind of Pal World level, and then it was brought down to this norm where they've kind of found themselves sitting for the past 6 months or so, even though they've had some really big improvements, which we'll talk about more in a moment with one of the future categories. But they have done cool things. They've added new weapons, new war bonds, new enemies, new, different challenges and whatnot for the community to go after week. So they've continued to provide a lot of ongoing support, along with a 90-day plan that's really improved the game over time. With all of that being taken into account, looking at everything on this roster right here, I still think it comes down to Fortnite, quite frankly, and I hate to be the guy that says that because I would really like another game to win, but thinking about the continual stream of new content that's kept Fortnite this ever-evolving ecosystem that has kind of made it, I saw somebody comparing it to Halo 3, like it's the Halo 3 of the modern kid. They're going to look back on Fortnite and it's going to be that cultural moment that kind of defined a 10-year period of their life as they were coming up. I mean, imagine being 12 whenever Fortnite launched. This is the game that you've kind of grown up with over the past couple of years, which is horrifying as somebody who's going to be 28 next year. But Fortnite, I think, is going to be the best ongoing game for 2024. Does it deserve it? Probably. Do other nominees also deserve it? 100%, without a doubt. Now, this is the category that I wanted to kind of skew off of, best community support. And this is recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness, inclusive of social media activity and game updates and patches. The nominees are Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy XIV, Fortnite, Helldivers 2, and No Man's Sky. Now, these have all done some impressive stuff, save for Final Fantasy XIV. I just don't keep up with it. I'm sure they've done some awesome stuff because it is an online, ever-evolving game. But Baldur's Gate 3 added mod support, continued to kind of nurture that community. It's still one of the most beloved games of the past 5 years, potentially of all time, depending on who you talk to. Fortnite, like we said, continued to evolve, and you've added tons of events and new weapons and new seasons that have brought back fan-favorite stuff. So they've listened to what people have wanted and brought that forward to the modern game rather than continuing to try and evolve and push stuff down people's throats when they might not want it. I even think back to no build mode that I think was released last year or the year before. People didn't want the build. They took it out. Now they've added a lot of other modes that have kind of built on that to make it a simpler game where you can kind of enter into it no matter what you really want. There's something for everyone in Fortnite right now. I think it comes down to Helldivers 2 and No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky, we've all heard the story. It's basically been 10 years at this point, and they have built this game from something that was a total failure when it launched in terms of performance and tech, and they have evolved this into an ever-evolving world of new updates, giant worlds to explore, incredible tech. This year, they overhauled the lighting system and water systems, tons of other stuff that's come into this game, along with expeditions, various missions that have really made it feel alive. And I think it's impressive to see that they've turned No Man's Sky into really one of the first live service games that's done it well and been able to survive for 10 years. And they're doing it all as they're building Light No Fire. So as they are designing new ideas for their next game, they're taking that new water system, they're taking that new lighting system, and they're evolving that and putting it into No Man's Sky so that not only is the next game going to be great, No Man's Sky continues to get even better, and they get sales and continued player support and whatnot. So it's nice to see them kind of defining a new way to develop a new game without abandoning what you'd already done and just trying to make the next thing a giant evolution instead of just making two very, very good games. In the same breath, Helldivers 2 has done something very different where they had this huge win right off the bat where Arrowhead didn't really expect to have the giant explosion of popularity they did with Helldivers 2. And from that, they continued to build on that game. They continued to refine it, make it better, and they have tripped up along the way. Once again, Sony got involved with the PSN account thing. They nerfed some stuff and made the game more difficult to play. But in that time, since then, they have now implemented a 90-day plan where they went back, buffed basically everything in the game, brought it back up to where it's just a very fun game to play with giant explosions and you're killing alien bugs and various robots and whatnot. And they're still planning for future updates. So you've got new war bonds, new worlds, new enemy factions. All of that stuff is on the way. And they've continued to be very transparent. I mean, you're talking about a 30-minute podcast style discussion around what they're changing when they are buffing these giant things and bringing the game back to where people really wanted it to be. So having literal communication, face-to-face communication, a constant stream of updates on social media from both the community director himself and, studio heads and whatnot, and the official account. I think Helldivers 2 has done just about as well as they could with the hand that they'd been dealt. I do think that it comes down to the fact that Helldivers 2 had issues this year. No Man's Sky did not. In Helldivers 2, the issues weren't really even of their own making. This was kind of something that was publisher forced whenever Sony got involved because of the stake they had in the game and the PSN account requirements and all of those issues. No Man's Sky, you can't really find anything bad to say about it. Even though it's been 10 years running, you can talk about bad about the beginning of it and the launch of it, but the past year of it has just been a continual strand of new updates that every time they're like, hey, it's good enough now. You don't have to do anything else. We like the game the way it is. And then Sean Murray comes out and he's like, hey, one more thing. And now we're on year 6 of one more thing. So for that reason, I think No Man's Sky gets the best community support for 2024. And quite frankly, it deserves it. Jumping to Best Independent Game for outstanding creative and technical achievement in a game made outside the traditional publisher system. The nominees are Animal Well, Balatro, Lorelei, and Laser Eyes. Love that name. Have no idea what's going on with the game. Neva and UFO 50. Special shout out to UFO 50. I've heard awesome things about this. It's kind of a collection of like 50 mini games that are throwbacks to classic games. So cool to see that kind of thing get the spotlight. Love the art style on the card, by the way. But I think it comes down to Balatro for this one. Now, shout out to Animal Well. I heard really good things about that. Came to Xbox a couple of months later, but Balatro is a game that took the world by storm, has not let go. And in the best independent game category, if you have a game of the year contender as well, I don't see how Balatro doesn't take home game of the year as well as potentially the game of the year itself. So best independent game, I think, is going to be going to Balatro. And then back to back, best debut indie game. For the best debut indie game created by a new independent studio, you once again have Animal Well and Balatro. Then you've got Manor Lords, Pacific Drive, and The Plucky Squire. The Plucky Squire, I feel like, is just on another level when it comes to the marketing beats and the, I guess, delivery of the game, but the reviews overall were either kind of, people loved it or they hated it, I guess. It didn't really meet the expectation for a lot of people, so it's unfortunate to see that one didn't really blow people's socks off the way that I think a lot of people, including myself, thought that it would. But I think, once again, this comes down to Animal Well or Balatro. And I do think, once again, it comes down to Balatro because Animal Well, while it is a good game from what I've watched of it, I haven't played it myself, and it uses light in very interesting ways. But Balatro is a game that anybody can pick up and play. It's almost like Solitaire, where if you went back and talked to the guy that invented Solitaire, that's a game that is designed for anyone and everyone, young, old, gamer, non-gamer, whatever you've got going on. You can play Balatro and have a good time. I would say it's even more accessible than something like Slay the Spire, where you kind of have to have those game mechanics understood in your mind, or Inscription, where it's kind of creepy and has those game mechanics. They are video game games. Balatro is a card game that happens to be a video game as well. So I think for that reason, for the accessibility side and the game design side, Best Debut Indie could also go to Balatro as well as one of the nominees. Best mobile game. I think you're knowing where I'm going with this one. For the best game playable on a mobile device, you've got AFK Journey, Balatro, Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket, Wuthering Waves, and Zenless Zone Zero. Now, I could just be out of touch on this one because AFK Journey, Wuthering Waves, and Zenless Zone Zero might very well be killer games. I could talk to my fiance about this one. She's the mobile gamer in the household. I'm not really. She's probably listening to me right now record this and laughing on the couch. But Balatro and Pokemon TCG, I think, are the ones that this comes down to. And I come back to the discussion around something that's welcoming for everyone, something that has that kind of approachability. And Pokemon trading card game is great from what I've heard. People that love Pokemon love TCG. Now, they have their issues with the packs, but it is what it is. It is a very, very good Pokemon trading card game. Balatro is a $10 one-time purchase in a mobile app store where it's just the game that you know from the consoles and the PC on a mobile device. And it's something that I could see a ton of people playing on the train. That's kind of the way that I perceive this one. So for that reason, I think that being able to kind of modify that game and bring it over to the mobile side of things, Balatro, I believe, is going to be the one that brings home the best mobile game as well. And it's $5 cheaper compared to the Steam version if you really want to go all in and don't want to buy the full version of the game for $15, because that extra $5 will really break the bank. Now we've got the best VR and AR game for the best game experience playable in virtual or augmented reality, irrespective of platform. And the nominees are Arizona Sunshine Remake, Asgard's Wrath 2, Batman Arkham Shadow, Metal Hellsinger VR, and Metro Awakening. Quick side note, if you have never played Metal Hellsinger and you're a fan of metal music, you should play it, whether it's VR or on Xbox or PlayStation or PC. Really, really good game. Rhythm-based. It's kind of like Guitar Hero Doom, if you will. Very, very fun. I had a great time playing through that one on Game Pass. But Arizona Sunshine Remake, cool to see on the list. I know that game kind of got panned a little bit. It was one of the earlier, I want to call AAA VR games that came out earlier on in this technology world. But for it to get a remake, I think it's cool because now it can really use that new technology to its highest potential. Now, what I think will probably take home the gold here is a split between Asgard's Wrath 2 and Batman Arkham Shadow. I've heard really good things about Arkham Shadow. It's also packed in with every new MetaQuest 3S headset, I believe. And I've heard that they've adapted the Arkham formula really well to a VR setting. But I feel like Asgard's Wrath 2, that's a game that, compared to all of the other games on this list, save for Arizona Sunshine, Asgard's Wrath 2 is a game that has kind of built up a reputation for itself as a VR game that doesn't cut corners because it's a VR game. It is built from the ground up to deliver a really stellar AAA gaming experience in virtual reality that is entirely original. This isn't something like Batman where it's built on the foundation of Arkham, or Metro where it's built on Metro. This is a unique idea designed from the ground up for VR. Not saying these other games aren't, but I like that originality of Asgard's Wrath 2, and I've heard nothing but good things about that one from the world building perspective and the depth. You can really spend time in this the same way you might something like Skyrim back in the day. So for all of those reasons, I think Asgard's Wrath 2 wins the best VR and AR game of the year, but that could be a toss-up. I could see a couple of different ones getting that pick personally. Now we get to Best Action Game. For the best game in the action genre focused primarily on combat, we've got Black Myth Wukong, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Helldivers 2, Stellar Blade, and Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. And I love the variety of this category because you have your shooters like Black Ops 6, you've got your action games, and I would throw Helldivers 2 and Space Marine 2 kind of into the same category, if you will, because while one is ripping and tearing, the other one's just the same kind of level of chaos of ripping apart Terminid style aliens. So those two are doing their thing. Then you've got Stellar Blade 2 that's kind of like the Bayonetta action, and then Black Myth Wukong that's kind of that action Souls-like blend a little bit. God forbid I call it a Souls-like. I got flamed for that earlier this year, but hey, here we are doing it again. So best action game, wide variety here. I feel like the best action game could come down to Black Myth Wukong because of what people primarily think of as an action game. Now, any of these could take it because I think any of these were critically acclaimed. These are all very, very good games. I could see Stellar Blade getting it for those action sequences. I could see Space Marine 2 getting it for the action nature of the game itself. Helldivers 2, tons of combat baked in there. Black Ops 6, again, very, very good combat in an FPS that's done Call of Duty better than most Call of Duty games have in the past 10 years. Black Myth Wukong, I think, did the basics really well. And again, I haven't played it, but looking at the gameplay of it, I think that from what the fans have said, it's a very, very good adaptation of not only that world and that lore, but building that into a game itself. So I feel like Black Myth Wukong deserves some recognition. I think the jury is going to recognize that it deserves some recognition. And I think Black Myth Wukong is probably going to be the one that brings home the best action game category. But again, that's one that very well could be a toss-up. I could see any of these games bringing home the gold on that one. So have to wait and see. Best action adventure game. The best action adventure game combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving. And the nominees are Astrobot, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Silent Hill 2, Star Wars Outlaws, and The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. This is the wildest category to me. And I feel like every year I've got some bone to pick with this one, because how do you put Astrobot and Silent Hill 2 and Star Wars Outlaws in the same category? Because like, yeah, sure, you're solving puzzles in Silent Hill 2, but these are very different than what you're doing in Echoes of Wisdom. And it's just an odd conglomeration of games here for me. But I think this is a very interesting category, mainly because I think critics are going to be very divided on it, because Prince of Persia does puzzle solving in a unique way. It is a more traditional Metroidvania style game. Silent Hill 2, more traditional puzzles in a horror style. And then Star Wars Outlaws, I just don't think it's going to have a lock for this one at all. I just don't think it's got that kind of potential, because the puzzles that are mainly in it are very repetitive. You have basically the same set of 2 or 3 puzzles, and that's the game in that capacity. I think out of all of these, I feel like Astrobot's going to deserve some recognition. And I think that based on what I've seen with the traversal and the puzzle solving and kind of the easy nature of it, but also the challenge levels, I think Astrobot could be the action adventure game of the year. And also, I just feel like it's an odd category. So again, that could be a blowout that I have no in-depth knowledge of, but I would vote for Astrobot in this one as the one that I think is going to potentially be the winner. Kind of shifting over into the best RPG. This is another one that I think is difficult for me to kind of parse, because it's for the best game designed with rich player character customization and progression, including massively multiplayer experiences. And you've got Dragon's Dogma 2, Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. And obviously these are all eligible because they're all RPGs, but rich player character customization and progression, that feels like it leans heavily into Dragon's Dogma 2. Very, very heavily. Now, Shadow of the Erdtree, once again, could get it. And I think that because I believe Balatro is going to lock down Game of the Year and be the one that upsets everyone, I think Shadow of the Erdtree is going to lock down Best RPG. Because again, thinking through how the gaming panel is probably going to get it, of the professionals that are in the industry, I think they're going to look at this and think, all right, Best RPG, Dragon's Dogma 2 did a lot right with character customization. You've got a similar depth to Shadow of the Erdtree that arguably does it better than Dragon's Dogma 2, even though they're very, very different games. So I think it's going to be Shadow of the Erdtree for this one, if it's eligible for multiple categories. I don't think it's going to win Game of the Year, but Best RPG, I could easily see that one getting locked down. Now, Best Fighting Game for 2024 really makes you remember how good 2023 was. I mean, we had Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 1 that are top of mind for me, but this year you've got Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, Multiverses, and Tekken 8. Very odd seeing the Powerpuff Girls, Wonder Woman, and the phone from the Powerpuff Girls on a panel next to Tekken 8 and Marvel vs. Capcom. But nonetheless, here we are. Now, I'm not your fighting game guy, haven't played any of these. I always just, quite frankly, get my ass handed to me anytime I pick up a fighting game. So keep that in mind as I predict what's going to win here. But Tekken 8 feels mainstream, feels like more people know Tekken 8. I've heard good things about what Tekken has delivered for 2024. I've also heard a lot of good things about Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, like a whole lot. And it's Spike Chunsoft and Bandai Namco, and I know they deliver, and I know Dragon Ball fighting games are typically good. So I think that based on what I think the fighting game community is really going to be wanting, and what I think the representation of that in the gaming media is going to want to choose, I think Dragon Ball could take it. I do think that based on the larger panel, I think that Tekken 8, because of how well known it is going to be the best fighting game of the year. Do I think Dragon Ball should win? Yes. Do I think Tekken 8 is going to win? Yeah. I think Tekken 8 is going to be your fighting game of the year. Then Best Family Game. This is an odd category and one that I don't think is really fair, because for the best game appropriate for family play, irrespective of genre or platform. Now, when I think about family play, I think about multiplayer, right? Like you're all gathering around to play Wii Sports or something. Like it's that thing that brings people together. Astrobot, Princess Peach, The Legend of Zelda, and The Plucky Squire are all single-player games. Those are all games that you play alone. So unless you're passing the controller or you don't mind your mom walking in and watching you play this game, those are by definition not really what I would consider to be family games. Now, they are games you can play with your family. Again, if you just want to pass the controller or enjoy things, or if it's just trying to be representative of the E for Everyone rating category, then sure, yeah, this is a best family game lineup here, I suppose. Now, if I was voting, again, based on my understanding of what a family game would be, Super Mario Party Jamboree would literally be the only one that I would consider to be eligible. But for the best family game in general, I think this has really got to come down to The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom or Astrobot, if I'm part of the gaming audience that's thinking about which one really did this better. I think it's a very difficult one to pick. I would say probably The Legend of Zelda, and that's just a gut feeling more than anything. I think Astrobot could also lock this one down because I've heard really, really good things about what this game is able to do. But The Legend of Zelda, I think, does a whole lot with that traditional Zelda setup, actually starring Zelda herself. And so I think that The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom will have best family game, but maybe the people agree with me, and Super Mario Party Jamboree, since it's a multiplayer game, is the one that brings people together. Now we've got Best Sim and Strategy Game, the best game focused on real-time or turn-based simulation or strategy gameplay, irrespective of platform. And the nominees are Age of Mythology Retold, Frostpunk 2, Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess, Manor Lords, and Unicorn Overlord. And this is a really unique category because all of these games are very different from one another. Like Unicorn Overlord and Age of Mythology, totally different games. Frostpunk 2 and Kunitsugami, almost literal opposites. And then Manor Lords, I think, is really interesting because it was developed by effectively one guy and a group of freelancers that he hired, but it was all kind of spearheaded by a very small team, and it was doing huge numbers on Steam earlier this year as this kind of like medieval community builder and management sim. But really good variety, once again. I think that out of all of these, what will win will either be potentially Frostpunk 2 or Age of Mythology. I could see Manor Lords doing a sweep here just because of the story behind it, if people are familiar with it, and if it's continued to kind of maintain that momentum. I haven't really kept up with the game all that much. And again, shout out to Kunitsugami. I've heard really good things about that one and Unicorn Overlord, but I think that for the best sim and strategy game, it's probably going to come down to Age of Mythology Retold or Frostpunk 2. My gut is going with Frostpunk 2, because I know the Frostpunk community is very strong. I know that people know this game, but Age of Mythology could sweep it as well. I'm going to vote Frostpunk, but this is one that I'm just not as in the loop on. So let me know down below, is that a fair assessment, or am I totally off base on that one? But I think Frostpunk 2 is going to be the one that takes the best sim. Best sports and racing game, potentially the most irrelevant category for me, other than the esports stuff coming up. For the best traditional and non-traditional sports and racing game, you've got F1 24, FC 25, NBA 2K25, Top Spin 25, and WWE 2K24. One of these things is not like the other, and that would be the one with The Undertaker in the middle of it, as well as John Cena and The Rock, along with other people that are deeper in the WWE lore. I think FC 25 is going to be the one that takes this. I feel like that's the one that takes it every year. So yeah, I think that's a win, just because I would imagine if you're looking at the gaming community in terms of the journalists and the people that are out there making content and like the reviewers and whatnot, FC 25 seems to be one of the only ones they play on a regular basis, at least talk about on a regular basis. So I think FC 25 is going to lock that one down once again. Best multiplayer game. For outstanding online multiplayer gameplay and design, including co-op and massively multiplayer experiences, irrespective of game genre or platform. Now listen, Warhammer, I love you, but let me tell you, Space Marine 2 up against Black Ops 6 is a repeat of the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. Okay, I love the fact that Space Marine 2 has multiplayer. I played it for an hour or two. It's okay. But you cannot, in the same category as Black Ops 6, reasonably expect to win. Come on, dude. And now the co-op side, maybe that's a game changer, but I don't think that this is going to be winning game of the year for the best multiplayer, I should say. Now, the nominees in total are Black Ops 6, Helldivers 2, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Tekken 8, and Space Marine 2. The best multiplayer, I think, comes down to either Helldivers 2 or Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Personally, I think Black Ops 6 has a lock because this is the first Call of Duty in a very long time that I feel really nails that grind, that nails the prestige system, the customization. Everything about this game feels really, really good on the multiplayer side, as well as the other sides too. Helldivers 2, though, very big deal earlier in the year. Very good game. Lots to talk about there in terms of just if it deserves it, which I think that it does. I still think Black Ops 6 locks it down. Now, Helldivers 2 could sweep. I think Black Ops 6 is also very, very deserving. Best Adaptation is up next, where it recognizes outstanding creative work that faithfully and authentically adapts a video game to another entertainment medium. You have Arcane, Fallout, Knuckles, Like a Dragon Yakuza, and Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft. Gotta keep it real. Did know there was a Tomb Raider animated TV show out there, so I would say I'm going to give that a look. Probably won't. However, Best Adaptation, anybody that thinks Fallout isn't going to win this, I don't know what to tell you. You're just out of touch, man, because Like a Dragon, I haven't heard anything about that. I know it just came out on Amazon like a couple of weeks ago. And then Arcane obviously is a big deal for the animated side, but Walton Goggins and Ella Purnell nailed it in Fallout. Phenomenal show. Best adaptation I've seen since The Last of Us for season 1. Very excited for season 2 here in a couple of months as well. But Fallout is not only a good adaptation, it's just a good show. It's got a good narrative. It's entertaining. We binged the whole thing in like 2 nights. So if that tells you anything, Fallout is the best adaptation, 100%. But shout out to Idris Elba for his work on Knuckles. I think it's hilarious that he's even involved in that in general. Good on you. Most anticipated game is up next, and this is one that I think is just a very unfair category, but it's interesting to discuss. Now, this is recognizing an announced game that has demonstrably illustrated potential to push the gaming medium forward. And I think this is super interesting because immediately, when you think about most anticipated game and look at the list of nominees here, Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, Ghost of Yotei, Grand Theft Auto 6, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and Monster Hunter Wilds, you immediately think, okay, Grand Theft Auto 6 has that on lock. I think what throws a wrench in that is the definition here, because a game that has demonstrably illustrated potential to push the gaming medium forward. So out of all of these, I think Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is going to be doing that from a technical perspective the same way that Death Stranding 1 did, because you had this strand system where it was kind of online, kind of not. It did a lot of interesting things in a very unique way. Ghost of Yotei visually clearly pushing the medium forward based on what we've just seen in a couple of snippets here and there. Grand Theft Auto 6, we are talking about Rockstar, coming off of Red Dead Redemption 2, coming off of 10 years of Grand Theft Auto 5, where that was the biggest game of all time, or one of the biggest games of all time. The hype for that game is on another level, and it's Rockstar, so I have faith they will deliver. And technically, again, much like Ghost of Yotei, I think visually and from a technical perspective, if they stick the landing, I should say, this is going to be a huge game, like one of the biggest of the next generation. Then you've got Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Again, lots of hype, but can Nintendo really do a whole lot that hasn't already been done with Metroid Prime in a new sequel? Not that the game's not going to be good, but I just don't know how much evolution they can really bring to that formula, comparing it to something like Metroid Prime Remastered on the Switch. I think it's going to be more of the same, but that's not bad. I just don't know if it's going to be falling under that category of potential to push the gaming medium forward. And then Monster Hunter Wilds, people are hyped about that one. I don't think that's got a shoe in here. I still think, based on my understanding, that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be the one that takes this one home, just because it's Grand Theft Auto 6, okay? Like, this is a game that is on another level in terms of excitement and hype, both within the industry and within the community. I just don't see a world where Grand Theft Auto 6 doesn't win most anticipated game. But I could also see, because of the definition of it, something like Ghost of Yotei taking it home as well. But I do think if there are 2 games that it could come down to pick between, Ghost of Yotei and Grand Theft Auto 6 are going to be the 2 that people are discussing. Now, this is where I start to get out of touch. Content Creator of the Year for a streamer or content creator who has made an important and positive impact on the community in 2024. I don't know enough about any of these people on a deep level to really make an assumption or a conclusion here. I've heard of Typical Gamer, haven't watched him that much. I know my Game Awards past experiences has been like the one that I'm least familiar with is usually the one that wins. So USADA Pecora over here on the right, probably going to be the one that takes it home. Have no idea. I've also seen Queso on TikTok, so I'm at least a little bit familiar with him. I'm not going to vote in this one, though. I'm going to take a pass. Much like the previous category, I'm not well versed in this, but best esports game for the game that has delivered the best overall esports experience to players, inclusive of tournaments, community support, and content updates, irrespective of genre or platform. I'm not going to vote in this one either, but I will say that League of Legends Worlds had 6.9 million viewers during 2024. Okay, that's a lot of people watching an event at one time. I don't want to vote based on the success of the esports side of League, but I think that League of Legends is doing a lot of things right if they've got 7 million people around the world watching other people play the game. Now, CS2, I know they've made some big strides in. Valorant, haven't really heard that much about this year, but I know it's still going strong. And then Mobile Legends Bang Bang, guess that's on the list as well. But let me know what I'm missing down below. Which one is the esports game of the year? Again, if I was voting, I would say League of Legends, but I just don't know enough about it to really make an assumption there. Now, this is where I'm totally out of touch. Best esports athlete, good on you, best of luck. I'm familiar with Faker. Everybody else on this list, I have no idea. Much like that, the best esports team, also totally out of the loop. Now, you throw a couple of Halo esports teams on here for the HCS, I'd probably be able to do a couple of things, talk about some stuff. But yeah, I just have no idea what's going on here with these nominees, so I'm going to take a pass on that one as well. And that brings us to the player's voice. This is 3 rounds that are coming up here shortly on December the 2nd, the 5th, and the 9th, where basically 30 nominees are brought up. That gets down to 10 nominees, and then it gets down to 5 nominees that are going to get voted on, and the winner is going to be announced during the Game Awards themselves. So this is the full, you are picking, there is no jury or panel. This is just the Player's Voice Award. So be sure to log in, pick your choice here, and maybe we'll do another video for the Player's Choice or Player's Voice whenever the time comes. But we'll have to see what those nominees are. So there they are, my picks for the Game Awards 2024. And I always love looking through these nominees and categories just to see what games made the cut. But a lot of controversial categories this time around, especially with that Game of the Year. And let me know down below, should Shadow of the Erdtree be nominated for Game of the Year? Or should they establish a 30th category for something like Best DLC or Best Expansion or Best Season to kind of compartmentalize that and just leave Game of the Year for brand new games? I'd love to know what you think down below. And of course, if you're new here, you like what you see and what you hear, hit that subscribe button down below and get videos like this every week and gaming news shorts throughout the week to keep you in the loop. But I'll catch you on the next one.